Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Arunjay Katakam. He's an author, speaker, thinker, serial entrepreneur, and he calls himself a recovering wealth chaser. Welcome to the show, Arunjay.
Thanks a lot, Ajay. It's great to be here. Thank you.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form. I know your India connection, so you'll be able to tell about that yourself. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about economics of hope, how one can rethink money and wealth for a better future, inclusive economics for all. In that backdrop, we'll have our conversation. But before that, as we said, let's understand a bit about your background, your journey, your India connection, also so that people know who they are listening to.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in India, in Hyderabad, and I had a really checkered education. So I found out I was dyslexic when I was 30. So going through school was quite a challenge and a struggle. But somewhere around 16, 17, I figured out I can do numbers. So I did accounting, and I did a Bachelor of Commerce, and then I left India and I moved to the Caribbean, to Trinidad and Tobago. It's a kind of funny story because I went there. One of my dad's classmates lived there, and he invited me, and India was touring. They're playing cricket, and I thought this was a great opportunity. So I went initially for a holiday, but I really loved it, and so I decided to move there. And it was kind of an opportunity to do something different. I did chartered accountancy, worked with Ernst & Young, EY, and qualified over there. Then moved to the UK and spent another 3 years at EY. So that was my kind of earlier career. And one of the things is from the age of 11, I really wanted to be super rich. This was a kind of a goal that I don't know where I got it from, but it was inside me. And doing accounting was for me a way of having a platform to go into entrepreneurship and understand business. Really be able to do that. So that was kind of the early origin. The next phase of my career, so when I was at EY in London, I was working in investment management. So I was auditing hedge funds and investment banks. And the path there for me next was to go into the industry, to go into investment banking, and that really was this opportunity to make millions. And a friend of mine told me, this was in 2007, and said that if you really want to succeed in this industry, you need to be so greedy that you're willing to knock out your granny's tooth and melt the gold filling. If you have that level of greed, this industry is for you. And I immediately knew that, there was no way I could, kind of really feel that I wanted to make millions, but that was not a path for me. And so I was very fortunate because I ended up leaving just before the financial crisis. And I think of myself fortunate because had I not left at that point, I would have probably stayed on, because you wouldn't leave a paycheck in the middle of a crisis. So that way I was already on my journey as an entrepreneur, and I discovered financial inclusion, mobile money, and that really kind of lit my fire, caught my attention, and I felt that's meaningful. I have the skills. I can help people drive. I can help people get included, get bank accounts, all of that. So I kind of spent almost 2 decades now in financial inclusion. So that's kind of my history. My parents still live in India. I visit once a year, kind of on average, and yeah, to see the progress there has also been phenomenal.
Absolutely, absolutely. So from wanting to make millions to yours for yourself, you are now wanting to impact millions all across the world.
Yeah,
Wonderful. As you yourself put it, I wanted to be, when I was young, I wanted to be super rich. Now I want to change the world. So I want to understand from you, how are you changing the world? You have written the book. We'll come to that, the book also. But I want to understand, a lot of people have wanted to change the world. I want to change the world. You are also the thing is, how do you get started? You know, a lot of youngsters want to change the world. They are changing the world in their own way. But how do you get started? How did you get started? How are you doing things on the ground? What are you doing exactly? You talked about financially inclusion, but I want to understand it better for a lot of people who want to understand it that way.
yeah, absolutely. And I want to say that I didn't start off wanting to change the world. So that wasn't a starting point for me. This is accidental in some ways. So when I left EY, I still wanted to make millions. I just didn't want to make it through this cutthroat way of investment banking. So I wanted to do good, and I wanted to make millions. And so when I reflect on kind of one of the things that really bothers me even right today is this inequality. Why do some people have so much and some people have so little? And growing up in India, poverty was all around, and people would say, so I'm not from a like super wealthy family, just affluent family, middle class, but people would tell me that these people are poor because they're lazy, because they don't want to work. And somewhere, in my journey, I figured out it was not true. It was the lack of opportunities. It was the economic model. It was all of these things. And so that's where the idea of going into financial inclusion kind of resonated, because I could make a difference and try to give them those opportunities that they're lacking. And now you can see it. It's played out with UPI. When you look on the streets, people, everyone has UPI, and it has improved their lives. Now, it's not like it went from absolute poverty to, riches, but it has increased general welfare just by giving people access to being able to pay and receive, make payments and receive money. So many times, if someone doesn't have any money but they have their phone, they can make a UPI payment. So that's a sale that would not have otherwise happened. Or, like so many ways in which it has really empowered people. So that was my starting point. And then from there, you learn more about the industry, and then you find ways to contribute. So I've done that mostly through policy work with the GSMA and other organizations, including the UN, where I spent 4 years working on the G20 roadmap for enhancing cross-border payments. Now, cross-border payments is really expensive, and that's why I chose that. But I was already, sort of 7-8 years into my career in financial inclusion when I decided the problem I really want to tackle is cross-border payments, because people pay 8, 10, 12% to transfer money back to their family. And that's more than a money lender would charge you. And it's your own money. Nobody's lending you any money. So that really was kind of the next part of it. But then it's a journey. So, you keep evolving. The one thing I think I really realized at some point in that journey was that if you really want to change the world and you really want to help people, you have to put that ahead of yourself. And this is the journey of shedding the need for wanting to make millions. So once I really truly let go of that, I was liberated, because the thing is that I had about 6 opportunities to make millions and it didn't happen. One reason or the other, and when you're still chasing a goal in that way, it's like you always feel lacking. You feel like I want to get this, be there, do that, and I am not. So when is this going to happen? And that's how long is a piece of string? Because there's no guarantees in life. It may never happen. It might take another 10 years, 20 years, 5 years. So I asked myself this question, so when the pandemic hit, it was a really, big kind of moment for me, because I realized also that there were even more structural problems. And I asked myself this question, that if I make all these millions, what am I going to do? And the answer was, I'm going to do more good. I just wanted to give back. At that point, and still today, I don't want to have a lavish lifestyle or any, I don't want to accumulate wealth for the sake of it. I wanted to give back. And so I realized that I could actually just short circuit this process, because there's plenty of money, plenty of people who want to give, who've made their money and want to give it back. There's fewer people willing to put their time and effort into doing the work, because everyone else is still chasing their millions. So these two things are not compatible. And I also realized, by wanting to make millions, I was actually the problem.
Absolutely. So you thought, you changed your thought process, and you did what? You also had this inclusive action lab. We'll come to that also, but first let's come to the book itself. When did you get this inspiration of book Generation Hope, how inclusive economics can help us all thrive? Tell us a bit about this.
Yeah, so this is the book here. I guess there will be a link
Yes,
for those who want
yes.
to buy. So like I said, when the pandemic hit, that was for me a big moment. In May of 2020 specifically, I realized that the economic model was broken. Even though my industry in total had added 500 million people to bank accounts, like nobody had any money in these accounts. And it's not just these 500 million, it was another 4 billion people. Half the world's population had nothing to fall back on in hard times like this. Everyone was kind of, at least these 4 billion people were living paycheck to paycheck. And so when the paychecks dried up, there was nothing. And so that was the moment I thought, really we need, financial inclusion is good and it's important. It's the first step, but we also need economic inclusion. And then we'll create a world where people can thrive, because until then, we're just extracting from the poor. When I was young, someone told me as kind of a business tip, I should not leave money on the table. So this is kind of a saying, which means you should maximize the deal. You should, yeah. So what happens is that mostly there's a power dynamic. And if you don't leave any money on the table, that means you're taking as much as you can. And when you do that, you leave the other person with less. So when you think especially about large companies and people who employ a lot of people, I'll give you an example in the UK, and then, it's true for the rest of the world as well. Here we have something called the minimum wage. So the minimum wage is at least some minimum guarantee of how much you have to pay to employ someone. But there are companies that are, so for example, the John Lewis Partnership and many others who pay what's called a living wage, which is about, roughly 15-20% more. But this is not the minimum wage, but a living wage, what is considered to have a more reasonable life, And these companies, they choose to pay that. It's a very small subset of companies overall. But by doing that, what happens is their employees have a better life. Their employees feel more loyalty to the business. And I can tell you from my experience of being in these business, as a consumer, the service that you receive is much better because they care. And so it's not charity, but it's a business model that helps people. it helps the employees, it helps the business, because overall it comes back to the business. And so this is the difference between paying as little as you can and paying something a little bit more, but still making it work for everyone. And that's the kind of thinking we need more of, so that more people can benefit and not just the wealthy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Many people use different terms to create their values for themselves. That value for many people use also this term called unlocking shareholder value. And in that, so and not leaving any money on the table for anyone else but just themselves. That is another world. And when such people talk about, doing things for other, the world just keeps on waiting and waiting and waiting. But we are seeing examples like you who are doing things. So I want to understand, when you talk about inclusive economics here, what is inclusive economics? Because in the name of economics, you see world over, either institutions, organizations, governments, everyone becomes, almost like adding to the problem and not actually bringing solace to the people who we are talking about. You know what I mean? I want to understand then, what does this inclusive economics all mean? Because you see the state of DEI at the moment, even the
Yeah.
US aids, what is happening to that? So many billions of dollars suddenly getting pulled out, so many states. So the world is changing. We can't, and those are people with power, with authority, and they have their own reasons to do it. So in that aspect, where is this inclusive growth? Who is this for inclusive growth for? Is it only for talking, or is it for the very people who are impacted by by poverty, by inequality? They will have to only create inclusive growth for themselves or amongst their own brethren.
Yeah. So there's a lot of change happening at the moment in the world. That's just, I guess, things keep evolving. We have to do what we believe in and what we think that makes sense. Now, inclusive economics, I've got a chapter in the book. It's chapter 7. So without going into too much detail, there are like 5 characteristics. The first one is growth. The second is participation. The third is opportunity. The fourth is stability. And the fifth is sustainability. Now, all of these together is what brings in, creates inclusive economics. It's something that was created almost 2 decades ago. The UN put out a definition, and then the world has kind of, there's a lot of work that's gone on, but it's still not mainstream, so when you talk about growth, growth, everyone talks about growth, but growth is not necessarily the way that you want to do it. Is in a sustainable way, in a way that makes sense for people and planet. And I think the key thing here really is thinking about this shift away from just, so there's a lot of detail in it, and without going into that, it's all in the book. But GDP itself as a metric is it's not the best metric. It doesn't take into effect negative externalities, for example, the pollution that's coming out, or those sort of things. It doesn't take into effect things that are not paid for. So childcare and other things like that, which is hugely important in our society. So as a metric, it's flawed. And so the type of growth that we're looking for, so the sustainable circular economy, these sort of things will really is the way we should look to go. And I believe we can achieve growth without kind of creating more problems, be it in pollution or inequality and kind of suppressing people's. It's all when you think about the sweatshops and you think about the way that the many businesses run, it's very problematic. So I think I have a quote here. Luckily, many economists are starting to realize that true inclusion puts people first, which is what the current models are missing. And that's at the heart of it. I'd say that's what it is. If you put people first, a living wage does that versus a minimum wage. And if you put them first in your business and you truly believe this business is to help these people first who are working in this business, and then the other people, you know, it really is what this is all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Arunjay, you talk a lot about hope. Are you really hopeful that this will happen everywhere, especially in the backdrop of people trying to not lose jobs because of AI, and people are looking at, many people are trying to save cost for themselves, better profits. So I want to understand how hopeful about you are about this aspect of bringing change, bringing inclusive growth.
Yeah, so I'm very hopeful. And let me explain. It starts with me. I have made this change in my life. I've gone from someone who wanted to make millions and be and do all of that, and I was that. And it took me, I would say 4 or 5 years of a deep introspection, thinking about, and all of this. But I made that transformation. I've made that change in my life. And firstly, it's liberating because I'm not chasing any millions anymore. I'm happy and content, and I'm doing the work I want to do. If today we lived in a world where you did not need money, I would be doing, 80-90% of what I'm doing today would be what I'm doing. Like that would not change. So so that's just from my own personal experience. Then I've met so many people who have also made this shift, because you start moving in these circles. So there's a B Corp movement that is, triple bottom line. So people, planet, profits. And that's a shift from just profit. So that's another big movement. There are about 6,000 companies who've now joined the B Corp community, and so that's a lot of people. And so you start to see more and more of this happening. I'm certainly not an individual isolated case. So, but the analogy I like to use is, you think of smoking. Smoking used to be cool 30 years ago. It was in the
Right.
movies, it was everywhere. People wanted to smoke. If you didn't smoke, something wrong with you, uh, then it changed. Like 20 years ago, it became, well, actually, this is not so cool. It's not a great thing. And they started, they realized secondhand smoke was a problem. It started being banned. Even India, was very quick to do that in the early 2000s. And so what happened was, smoking was not cool anymore. You have to go outside. Like kind of, you know, and socially also, little bit of a, you know, people you kind of don't think that's a great thing to do. So this shift happened, and I feel like this will happen in terms of seeking profit just for yourself. Today it's cool to be super rich. I think in the coming decade it won't be so cool. Now, I also want to say this, like today more people smoke than ever before. Now, of course, the population increases, and that's why, but over 1 billion people smoke today. So it's not like smoking has gone away. In the same way, it's like always there will be people who want to make their millions. There will always be people who want to be super rich and who will always think only about themselves. But that doesn't mean that we should join them. And as a percentage, as long as that becomes less and more people think about doing things for others, and not just themselves, we will start to see that change.
Absolutely. We will start to see that change. Who is your book for? Is it for those people who want to make millions, or is it for people who uh, want to get a living wage?
So I think it's for people who really want to make a difference, who really want to understand, more about the economic system and make that difference. Because the thing is that if you want to make millions and you're set on it and you don't want to do anything but, be self-servant in that sense, then probably you're not going to pick up this book. But if you have a crack, even if you want to make millions, but you have a crack and you're not sure, and you see, like, you let the light come through the crack, then this is a great book that could help change that trajectory. And equally for people who really want to make a difference, who really want to make impact, there's a lot of really interesting things in the book that will help understand the current landscape and where and how we can make a difference.
Absolutely. There's much to learn from you about all this, Arunjay, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you, learn more about what you are doing. How do you see the future of the world, especially with regards to inclusive economics, and people can learn a lot from your book. What is the best way for them to connect with you, Arunjay?
Yeah, I have a Substack for those on Substack, and LinkedIn is the other platform that I'm quite active on. So I'd say those would be the two best ways to do it. Yeah.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Ajay.